Play of the match.
Hey guys, Simpson2142 here, and today I am bringing you a guide on how to master the infamous attack Symmetra. I'll be going through the mechanics of her character, which targets you should be going for, which targets you should be avoiding, positioning and strategy on each game mode and type, when is it best to use the teleporter, and when is it best to use the shield generator. And finally we'll be covering as when it is best to actually switch off Symmetra. When the match starts, lol. Okay, so let's start off with the basic mechanics of Symmetra. Symmetra's primary weapon is her photon beam, which when you hold down the fire button it will fire out a homing beam, and yep, homing beam, it will instantly lock on, which will target any nearby enemies and will increase in damage the longer you're locked on for. For the first second it will deal just a measly 30 damage per second, but in the second it will double to a respectable 60 damage per second, but after 3 seconds it will double to a whopping 120 damage per second. And for a beam that is locked onto a target, that makes this an extremely powerful weapon. The catch to this extreme power, however, is that it is very short range. You need to be within 7 meters of your target for the initial lock-on, and stay within 9.5 meters to prevent it from breaking off. Meaning that high mobility targets such as Tracer and Winston will easily be able to escape you. And it also means that Symmetra has to get dangerously close to her target, which when going up to other close range heroes such as Reaper with his high damage shotguns, or McCree with his flashbang and Fan the Hammer, this can be incredibly risky. Symmetra does have an alternative fire which charges and shoots an energy orb over infinite range, or at least until it meets the map's edge, but this takes 2 seconds to fully charge, deals a maximum damage of 125, and has a quarter second of cooldown before each charge, and it travels at a very slow speed of only 10 meters per second, meaning that most competent targets will be able to move out of its way. The one cool thing this orb does possess, however, is its ability to go through barriers, especially that of Reinhardt barriers. So firing a fully charged shot into a Reinhardt barrier who has his entire team hiding behind him can be a sneaky way to score some damage, but also more crucially to gain precious ult charge. Next we have Symmetra's sentry turrets, which will automatically fire to anyone who's within 10 meters line of sight. Each little turret will do 25 damage per second, which may not seem like very much, but having all 6 firing at a single target with 200 HP or less is going to kill them in less than 2 seconds. The turrets will also slow the target's movement speed, making them particularly lethal against mobility-based heroes such as Genji, Tracer and Lucio. The downside of these turrets, however, is that they only possess 1 HP of health, and so can easily be destroyed. Weapons like Winston's Tesla Cannon and May's Freeze Spray can clear a room of turrets in less than a second. This also makes them incredibly vulnerable to explosive splash damage. And when a turret is destroyed, it will have a 10-second cooldown before it can be redeployed again. So try not to waste them in spots where they're going to easily get destroyed. Finally, we have Symmetra's Photon Barrier. This was a new ability introduced to her to make her a more viable character in offensive situations, in which she can project a moving barrier which can absorb about 1025 damage, similar to how Reinhardt's barrier works. And although not as big and not as strong as a Rein shield, if timed right it can provide the perfect window to allow an attacking team to push past a choke point to seize an objective, especially when combined with a tactical Lucio speed boost. So that's the basic mechanics of Symmetra. Now let's look at how to best utilize them in order to make her a force to be reckoned with. Symmetra may not require much aim in order to be effective, but she does require target prioritization, positioning, and timing. Target prioritization. As Symmetra, your main target priorities are going to be the enemy's supports. All supports only possess a health pool of 200 HP and have very little capability to effectively defend themselves from you. Once your beam is locked onto your first target, it will be dead in just over 3 seconds. All you have to do in that time is try and stay within range of them and avoid getting killed. Now, supports generally tend to stay close to one another, and that is actually a good thing with Symmetra's Photon Beam, as once it has reached its full power, it will remain at that full power for a few seconds, even after you've disconnected from the target. This makes her potential to chain kill incredibly lethal, as once you're at full charge, you'll be able to kill a 200 health hero in less than 2 seconds. Even more lethal heroes such as Soldier and McCree are going to have a very hard time killing you once you are at full charge. This will also put the enemy's frontline tanks in a bit of a predicament. Do they turn around and try and kill you before you kill their healers? But in doing so, they then leave themselves vulnerable to attack from the rest of your team on the front line. Or do they continue to hold the front line and just hope for the best? Other targets for you to focus would be flankers such as Tracer and Genji. Both these heroes have very low health pools and usually rely on their mobility to keep them alive and safe. But when you're instantly locking onto them with a homing beam, there is very little that mobility can do to save them. They will either have to completely retreat, making them useless as a flanker, or do they stand and fight and hope that they can land a lucky shot on you before their 3 seconds is up. And fun fact, Genji cannot deflect photon beams. Many Genji players don't seem to realise this. I don't know if it's a player reflex or just ignorance, but I will be locking onto them, they will try and deflect, and that just solidifies their fate. It's fantastic. But do bear in mind, however, a Genji can deflect your photon orb. Okay, next thing, targets to avoid. Where Symmetra will have the upper hand against squishy targets, it couldn't be more opposite for the large health pool heroes like the tanks. Symmetra is a relatively weak hero in 1v1s. She has no mobility, she has no escape abilities like Reaper's Wraith Form, and her damage takes a while to get going. Symmetra's strength lies in her ability to catch heroes off guard and then have them finished off before they realise what's happening. Tanks, however, with their larger health pools, can't be finished off quite so quickly, and will more often than not be able to finish you off before you can them. The best thing you can do to combat a tank is actually just try and ignore them. You can try and initially fire your photon beam into, say, a Reinhardt barrier to give it full charge, and then actually run past the Reinhardt to try and target his support, which will most likely be close behind him, pumping him full of heals, such as Mercy or an Ana. Once you've run past the Reinhardt, you can quickly take out the Mercy or Ana in less than 2 seconds, and even if the Rein gets a pick on you, you taking out a healer is far more valuable than then taking out you as a Symmetra. Other close range heroes such as Reaper could be particularly problematic, as a well aimed shotgun to the face will make short work of your measly 200 health. McCree should also be treated with caution, as a flashbang and a left click to the head will finish you instantly. You can try baiting out his flashbang with a well-timed photon barrier, but even then the odds are still more against you than in your favour. Positioning and timing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, aiming is not so much of an issue when it comes with Symmetra, as you have a beam which will automatically lock onto your target. But what you do need to have a lot of is self-awareness and correct positioning. Now, Symmetra is a tricky hero for this, as she has no effective ranged damage, but also does not initially put out high amounts of damage when in close range. And she also does not possess any abilities to help get her out of danger. Compare this to another close range hero like Reaper, who has instant high impact damage with his dual shotguns. He has an increased health pool of 250 as opposed to Symmetra's 200, and he has his teleport ability to get into sneaky locations, and most crucially he has his Wraith form to escape any danger should the fight not be going his way. So what does Symmetra have that can favour her over a choice such as Reaper? Well, her turrets. These are the key asset to give you the upper hand in almost any 1v1 situation. They not only offer additional damage, but they will also slow down your opponent's speed, but most crucially, it will create shock and confusion. They're suddenly torn with the decision of turning away from you in order to deal with your turrets first, or do they try and kill you first and hope to survive the turret's onslaught afterwards? And it is just this split second of confusion that will actually seal their fate, as by the time they've made their decision, your turrets would have inflicted damage, your beam is now charged up to quickly finish them off. And the best way to envision this playstyle is to kind of picture yourself as a spider, as I know even though Widowmaker is considered to be the spider-like character of Overwatch, I think this metaphor is actually best applied to Symmetra, as she kind of sets up her web of turrets in a closed environment and waits for a poor victim to step into this web. And once they're entangled in your little lasers of doom, she'll move in for the kill with her photon beam. And this is honestly the best type of positioning to use for Symmetra. Set up an area with multiple sentry turrets, try and bait the enemy in to where the advantage is then turned into your favour. As Symmetra, you're also going to want to try and remain in as much cover as possible. Symmetra is extremely vulnerable to long-range heroes such as Pharah and Soldier, as she can't really project any effective long-range damage herself. Hug walls, hug corners, and always try to set up sentries to cover your trails. That way, if you happen to run into a surprise enemy, you can deploy your photon barrier to initially shield yourself from any attack, run back to the area your turrets are set up, and depending on the situation you can either use the turrets to distract the enemy to give you enough time to get away, or you can actually engage into the battle and try and win them in a 1v1 situation. Now, in some situations you may need to play a little more aggressively rather than waiting into a room for an enemy to come and meet you. An example of this could be seizing a capture point. Now, as I mentioned before, Symmetra is not the best hero for a 1v1 situation. Her best playstyle is to get the initial jump on the enemy to create shock and confusion and hopefully kill them before they realise what's going on. So if your team are moving in to seize the objective, you're going to want to remain slightly behind and initially use your alternate fire to just fire some orbs into the enemy, hopefully scoring a bit of damage or even a kill. Whilst doing this, you're going to want to keep an eye out for any squishy targets which may stray to the edge of the fight. This is normally what the enemy supports will do, as they can still heal their tanks, but also be as far out of the action as possible to not sustain damage. This is where your opportunity is to strike. As you can see here in this clip on Hollywood, I sneak around the enemy's frontline tanks and manage to pick off 2 of their supports. Another tactic is to create an almost decoy approach. Let's say the enemy Reinhardt is holding defense and has his barrier up. So long as your team are there with you for support, you can fire your photon beam into his barrier, as this will still gain the damage charge. Once you have full charge, run straight through his barrier and pounce on the squishy targets behind. Once your beam is fully charged, you can easily take out 2 squishy targets before the enemy has a chance to kill you. And if even better yet, you happen to have a Mercy pocket healing you behind, you could potentially take out all supports and DPS in one full charge. Having a fully charged Symmetra beam is like having a fully charged Saria weapon. Just hold left click and move forward. Okay, teleport or shield generator. So as I record this, Symmetra is so far the only character in Overwatch to be given the choice of multiple ultimates. You can either choose to use the teleporter, which can be used 6 times in total before disappearing, to which then you have to recharge it all over again. Or you can have the shield generator, which will give all teammates a 75 shield to add on top of their health pool. This shield has a range of 50 meters and can even be applied through walls and objects. Unlike the teleporter, this also has unlimited usage and will only disappear if it's destroyed by the enemy or if a checkpoint is seized. So the question that a lot of people ask is, which one should I use? Now in some situations this is very simple. If you're on defense and trying to hold the first capture point, you're going to want a teleporter in order to counter your respawn disadvantage. If you're on defense holding the final point, you're going to want a shield generator, as a teleport is going to have little value when the battle is just outside of your spawn. But what about in all the other situations, like when the payload is halfway along its course, or on King of the Hill maps? Is it better to give your team the ability to get to the front line quicker after dying, or is it better to try and keep them alive so they never have to leave the front line at all? Now unfortunately there's no clear black and white answer as to what will be the best in each situation, as it all depends on your team comp and the enemy's team comp and the skill level of your team, etc, etc. But as a basic rule of thumb, I would always advise to choose the teleporter over the shield generator when your team does not have an immediate spawn advantage. People really do underappreciate the value of being able to get back to the front line as quickly as possible, especially on maps like King of the Hill. Having the ability to get your teammates back to the objective faster than the enemy can help you regain the number advantage after losing the initial pick. And more importantly, having the objective quicker to get to can help prevent trickling, which in uncoordinated teams is the primary cause of losing the match. And for those not aware of the term trickling, this is where teammates will run in by themselves to the enemy team and end up getting picked off one by one. This is particularly common amongst faster heroes like Soldier, Diva and even Reinhardt, who will run on ahead, leaving the slower heroes behind, and by the time the slower heroes are caught up, it's too late. Having a teleporter gives the slower heroes the ability to catch up to the objective much quicker, and so subconsciously encourages moving in as a solid unit. And having a teleporter that the enemy isn't expecting can also open up the possibility of surprise flank attacks, such as in this clip example you'll be seeing now, where we're on New Barney and we're pushing the final point of the payload. I place down a teleport in this location, which allows my team to spawn behind the enemy's front line, jump on the payload with little to no resistance, and by the time the enemy has figured out what's happened, it's too late, we've captured the point. But bear in mind, tactics like this, however, will carry a high risk. Your teleporter could quite easily get destroyed, or your team may just end up spawning into an absolute frag fest and get picked off the moment they come out of that teleport, feeding enemy ult charge. So okay, we've discussed the teleporter, but when is it better to use the shield generator instead? I would say in situations where your team is carrying more squishy heroes in your composition. Having a shield generator to give your Tracer or your Genji an extra 75 health can make a huge impact on their survivability, not only allowing them to stay in the fight longer, but also allowing them to play more aggressively and commit to more kills on the enemy that they might have otherwise thought twice about. It is also then quite fittingly that having a shield generator can also favour your team should the enemy be running a flanking dive comp themselves with a Tracer or Genji. Their primary targets are going to be your supports, and giving your supports that crucial 75 extra health to play with will often make the difference between life and death. And your defenseless Mercy will especially be grateful for this. Speaking of Mercy, she is also an influential factor as to whether you want a shield generator. Having a Mercy on your team can also give rise to the possibility of reviving fallen teammates, making the use of a teleporter to get fallen comrades back to the front lines less essential. Next point, knowing when to switch off Symmetra. Symmetra can be an incredibly powerful hero and a great asset to the team, but if the enemy team has a comp that Symmetra is weak against, you're not going to get that value out of her and essentially cost your team the match. Heroes that Symmetra particularly struggles against are Winston. His Tesla cannon can destroy a room of sentries in a split second, his high health pool makes him difficult to take down, and his bubble shield will get in the way of your photon beam, making it difficult for you to stay on targets. Zarya is also particularly troublesome. Symmetra's turrets and slow firing orbs provide the enemy Zarya with the perfect opportunity to gain easy charge from her bubble shields. Not to mention that a bubble shield popped onto an enemy that you're trying to kill will give them those precious few seconds to either get away or have a chance to kill you first. And then you've also got the trouble of long range heroes. Pharah, Hanzo and Widow can be particularly problematic as you have no effective counter against them. Pharah especially can fly over, flank your turret position set up and destroy them. Once Symmetra's turrets are down, she actually becomes quite a weak hero, so if you're not getting maximum value out of your turrets, it is time to switch over to a more useful role. And now my final but also most important tip for any Symmetra player out there is making sure your teleport is facing in the right direction.
Teleporter online.
People don't like it when you place a teleport down and it's facing the wrong way. So don't do it. Okay? Cool. Anyway guys, that's about everything I can think of for this Symmetra guide. Let me know what you thought of the guide and let me know if I missed out any crucial points that you think should have been included. Hopefully with this information to hand, we can show the world that Symmetra is not just a one-trick pony whose sole purpose is to provide a teleport for the first capture point on defense. Let's help make Symmetra part of the Symmetra.